reporting from Mission Control Houston, and welcome to today's Space Station Live. You're joining us here inside of the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, looking down now at the Orbit 2 team currently manning consoles throughout the control room, monitoring all the systems on this orbiting laboratory. Today's team is being led today by Flight Director Chris Edlund, you can see standing up there. Joining him at the Capcom position, serving as a communication link between our astronauts up in space and the teams down here on the ground, is Hal Getzelman. Again, that team right now is the crew of Expedition 35, a six-man contingent of astronauts from countries around the globe. They're being led right now by Canadian Space Agency astronaut Chris Hadfield there in the front row on the right. Behind him, a Russian cosmonaut Roman Romanenko and NASA astronaut Tom Marshburn all the way on the right there. Those three have been on board the International Space Station since late December, scheduled to come home in a little under 2 weeks from now. Rounding out the crew, we have our three newer crew members who just launched back in the end of March. Two Russian cosmonauts, Pavel Vinogradov and Alexander Mazurkin, and finally one more NASA astronaut, Chris Cassidy. On board the station, the crew in a mix of research studies and maintenance tasks throughout the station, starting off with Commander Chris Hadfield, who immediately upon wake-up today participated in the reaction self-test. It's a series of reaction timing tests the astronauts undergo throughout their long-duration space flights. Aside from that, he was setting up a sample and a camera recording system for the binary colloidal alloy test, an ongoing research study into small colloids suspended in fluids. It's a particle experiment on board the International Space Station. He was also on the hook today to set up the Space Acceleration Mass Measurement System. He'll be replacing a laptop. That's an ongoing NASA study looking at the small forces such as vibrations and the acceleration of the International Space Station resulting from the operation of numerous hardware and crew activities, and also dynamic events such as spacecraft docking and maneuvering. Moving on, our first Russian cosmonaut, Pavel Vinogradov, Expedition 35 flight engineer, is over in the Russian segment sampling some of the condensate water out of the gas-liquid mixture filter. He was working on that yesterday, cleaning a few fan screens and doing some maintenance work. He'll also be inside of the recently docked 51P Progress vehicle, transferring some of the cargo out of that to the International Space Station. That Progress delivered just over 3 tons of supplies to the International Space Station. You can see the current makeup of all visiting vehicles docked here, that Progress 51 all the way in the back there. He'll be transferring some of that cargo over for stowage in various spots around the station. Meanwhile, Alexander Mazurkin also taking a part in that cargo transfer from that Progress vehicle. He's also involved in the Russian Sprut experiment this morning, which looks to investigate the unfavorable impact that the microgravity environment has on the astronauts' hydration status throughout their space flights. And he'll also be over in the Russian segment doing some routine coolant system maintenance. Meanwhile, NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy was working on setting up the combustion integrated rack a little bit earlier this morning for another run of the BASS experiment, BASS standing for the burning and suppression of solids. It looks at igniting and a number of various fuel samples in that microgravity environment, hoping to determine better methods for fire suppression, especially in microgravity. Also feeding into computational models used down here on Earth for those suppression methods, not only in space but for systems around the globe here. And then right now he's working on the extravehicular mobility unit, the spacesuits that these astronauts use when they step outside the station. He'll be doing a dump and refill of the water contained inside as just some of the routine maintenance needed to keep these suits in working condition. Our third Russian cosmonaut, Roman Romanenko, did some body size measurements earlier this morning right upon wake-up, but his main task today will be preparing that Soyuz craft for the undocking that it's scheduled to undergo just under 2 weeks from now on May 13th, when he'll be departing the International Space Station alongside Chris Hadfield and Tom Marshburn. They'll be bringing an end to their stint on board the station by the time of undock, having spent about 144 days on board the orbiting complex. Romanenko will be preparing the vehicle and pre-packing a number of the items that will be coming back, and then doing some more generic crew departure prep in addition. Then our final crew member on board, Tom Marshburn, working with the integrated cardiovascular study today, taking a number of ultrasounds of his heart, integrated cardiovascular, looking to track and monitor the atrophy of the heart muscle throughout long-duration spaceflight, as these astronauts are exposed to microgravity environments for long periods of time. He'll also be getting a chance to do a ham radio pass, using a ham radio much like found down here on the ground, talking to students in Greensboro, North Carolina.